do the job properly, but also if there are some that are training and they're training for the status, and quite clearly you've got to keep them on. And it might well be in some situations having people that are training for that status in the school might well be a good thing to do. We've just in the last few years created 2 million extra apprentices. They're people working in the environment where they're not fully qualified, but they're learning. So I think it's important thing is that we do make sure that we give the best education to our children, and we get the best teachers, and that they do end up being fully qualified, and that we train them in the best way we possibly can. And some of that might be on-site work as well.
Thank you. And finally, Richard Ford, UKIP.
Thanks. It's kind of ironic that Labour's Secretary and the Shadow Secretary of State for Education went to one of the most exclusive public schools in the country, in Westminster, I think, or University College School, where you pay 35, 40 grand a year for your child to be educated. And yes, he would have been educated by unqualified teachers, but the results for those schools are still very, very good indeed. So I guess probably I'm in the middle somewhere, because there are clearly unqualified teachers who are very, very good teachers who get very good results at schools like Westminster, for example. And there are in the public sector as well, unqualified teachers who are getting good results. I think it's an aspiration to be aimed for every single teacher to have an appropriate qualification, and hopefully 15, 20 years from now that will be the case, but there will be a transitional period, and I think Christine alluded to that. It will take a time for current teachers to go and get the qualifications, or maybe some are older and don't want to do that. But I think it's an aspiration to be aimed for, but I think we have to be realistic. It's 13%, that's a significant amount of people. Why get rid of perfectly good teachers just because they don't have a piece of paper? It's not quite the same as a surgeon. Generally, alluded to the fact that they have a doctor or a medical personnel working in the hospital who's not fully qualified yet. We've got good teachers who aren't qualified, but let's aim for the gold standard of, say, 15, 20 years from now, having 100% of teachers in the state sector, and in the independent sector for that matter, who are fully qualified on paper, as well as in practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to more of a local question, and it comes from Keith Walden. Could you get your question, please, to the panel?
Yes, there are sufficient places available each September to accommodate all Gloucester pupils transferring from primary education to secondary schools in the city. Gloucester has 4 selective secondary schools and 1 faith secondary school. Pupils from outside the city take up places at these schools and effectively displace Gloucester pupils who must travel to schools outside the city. Should Gloucester pupils who travel to schools outside the city be eligible for free transport?
Very interesting question. I'm going to go to our local people first before I come to our General Secretary, and I'm going to ask Jonathan Ingleby to start, please.
I don't really know what's fair. Your problem is free transport, I take it. Right? Free transport. Is that the problem you...
No, the problem is displacement of children from Gloucester by children coming in from outside the city, and therefore children from Gloucester have to travel outside the city at parents' expense.
No, that doesn't seem fair.
Absolutely.
Do parents have a choice, is one of the questions. Do some parents choose to go outside the city, perhaps? I don't know is the answer. I don't know whether, except that it doesn't seem fair that children here in Gloucester are being displaced by children from outside. It doesn't seem fair, and I can't say more than that.
I'll speak to you later.
I'm going to come to the MP for Gloucester at the moment, Richard. You must have had parents coming to your door this one. I'm going to ask you if you'd like to answer that one.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question, Keith. It's always historically been there because a lot of people from the south of the city, particularly Huffley, Gardner and Abbey, have gone to Chosen Hill or Churchdown for some time. So the idea that people have never been travelling out of the city boundaries hasn't been true for a long time. And I think I'm right in saying that the bus services to both those schools are totally free. There's no question of anyone having to pay.
No, you're wrong.
Am I wrong on that?
You are wrong.
Well, very expensive.
Okay. In terms of the wider point, I think you're trying to make about selective schools and grammar schools.
Sorry, Richard, can you speak up a bit, please?
Yes, sorry. I was answering the first point, on which I think I was actually inaccurate on the bus fares from the south of the city to Churchtown. But the second point I was going to make, I think there was a sort of wider question about the role of selective schools in the city grammar schools, I think implied in this question. Am I right? Or?
If you like.
Well, it's if you like, so you're asking.
No, I'm saying that for the last 5 or 6 years, about 500 pupils per September have been excluded from schools in the city and must travel outside the city.
Yeah.
It means that on every single day, 2,000 pupils travel by bus or car or bicycle outside the city, and a similar number travel inside the city. And from a green point of view, that's balmy.
So
Find the solution if you like, but it's balmy.
Right. So I think the word I would disagree with is the word sort of excluded. A lot of people have chosen to go to both those schools in particular for many years. So that isn't a deliberate exclusion policy. There is an issue, it's quite true, about the fact that the percentage of pupils from the city going to our 4 grammar schools over the years has declined. And that goes back, I think, to the late 80s, when we didn't impose, if you like, geographic boundaries on where children went to school. There are advantages there and there are disadvantages. So in the case, for example, of Catholics living in the county who want to go to St Peter's School, I think it would be quite wrong to impose geographic boundaries on them, because there are quite a lot of places in the county where they couldn't go to a Catholic faith school. And unless you are strongly against the concept of a faith school, not everybody who goes there is Catholic by any means, but that is the core of their offering, then I think that's perfectly understandable, and I think it's a good thing in terms of the choice. I think the issue for the grammar schools is that the competition, once you opened everything up geographically, has become much more intense for pupils from the cities. So they don't have the strength of links to some of the local primary schools that I think they should have, and that I think actually some of them would like to have. And that's something, fun enough, I've been discussing with some of them recently in some detail, and we have got some suggestions on ways forward there, which would mean that more pupils from the city would go, and there'd be stronger links between them and the local primary schools. But in short, to the second part of your question about should we be looking at reimbursing parents for the cost of transport for pupils outside the city, I'm very happy to have a look at that. I must confess I thought the bus fares to Chosen Hill and Churchtown were free, so if I'm wrong on that, I'm happy to look into that too.
I'll speak to you later.
And he said it was public forum. Okay.
Thank you, Keith. I have probably 3 points that might address different parts of the question. The first one, on the transport, my understanding is that all children in this city are allocated a school place at a non-selective school. Clearly, some of them either pass 11 plus and choose to go to grammar schools, or for some reason their parents wish to send them somewhere different and want to discuss that. If the school that they are allocated is a longer distance away, then they do get free transport. But in short distances, I believe it's 3 miles, then you have to pay. So that, I think, Richard, is why though those schools are not in the Hufflecote or those particular areas of the city, it's still not far enough to qualify. My second point is about school capacity, and I think where we're heading is into a problem with secondary schools in this city, whatever their creed, colour, whatever you like. Obviously, we've seen 2 new primary schools be built as a result of the population growing so much, and particularly around Kingsway and Copeland Park, not very far from here. In fact, I was knocking on doors in Kingsway yesterday and people were raising those issues with me. We really need to address that secondary school issue. And as people may or may not be aware, the current government, after 2010, imposed a restriction so local authorities can't build new schools, even where they're needed. They're relying on free schools and other things to pop up, hopefully, in the area that they're needed, which isn't what's happening. So Tristram Hunt's committed to allowing local authorities once again to decide if we do need new secondary schools and build them if that is decided to be the priority. And finally, just on the, I'm amazed by the way that children come and go in and out of the city. It is quite astounding, and how far people travel to come into the city for the grammar schools. Our school should be for Gloucester people primarily. Let me be clear, there are city constituency boundaries which are a bit difficult to explain or to appreciate and understand, because Long Levens is in the city council area but not in the city constituency. Touchdown and Brockworth are not. They're all part of Gloucester City in my view. Clearly they wouldn't be part of the constituency if I'm elected as the MP. And when we talk about our city and the people in Gloucester, I include those outlying areas as well, but we need to prioritise our people first.
Thank you, Sophie. And Richard Ford, UKIP.
Thank you very much. It's interesting really, because the gentleman mentioned selective schools.
No, I didn't.
I thought you did.
No, I'm afraid it was our colleague on the end who mentioned it.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about both categories then. Sorry for the misunderstanding there. As far as selective schools are concerned, the grammar schools are concerned, that is a UKIP policy, and there will be a grammar school in every district. At the minute, there were 1,200 kids bused into Gloucester from other parts of Gloucestershire, Forest Dean, Cheltenham, Stroud, although there are selective schools in Stroud and Cheltenham as well. There are only 27 kids from Gloucester City who couldn't go to a selective school in Gloucester. 1,200 kids come here, and yes, there's an impact on the environment. And those 27 kids, yes, they should have free transport. As far as other schools are concerned, within 3 miles, I think it makes sense for children to be able to make their own ways to school. I mean, there are bikes, there are other means of doing that. Beyond 3 miles, yes, I do think it's a big burden upon parents, and I think it's something that should be looked at, because people cannot afford it. The national health, children's education, 2 of the most important things for our country. And we want to make sure that kids get to school as near as they can to where they live. They're safe in doing so in dark winter nights and all the rest of it. Yes, if it's within 3 miles, it's not unreasonable, particularly where it's flat here in Gloucester, for them to get a bike, to walk, whatever else. But beyond that, yes, there should be a contribution within the ability of the state to pay for that.
Thank you. And finally, Jeremy.
At one time, the county council would pay the travel costs for children that live a fair distance away to go to grammar school and to go to faith schools. That's now been stopped being phased out by the county council. It's a policy that I support. It would be unfair for children that have a distance to travel to be able to get paid to go to selective school, but those going to comprehensive school, like the one in Churchdown, not getting funding to travel. But the real problem is that it's a fundamental structural problem of education in Gloucester. We have 16 forms of entry in selective education in the city, and we've got 6 forms of entry in Cheltenham. And that what it means is a distorted provision in the city. And we've got the situation where this school, 97% of the children come from Gloucester, live within the boundaries, whereas 2 schools in my part of the city, Denmark Road, in my own ward, 35% of children go to that school, come from the city, the rest come from outside. And only 29% of children who go to Tommy Rich's school come from the city of Gloucester. Now that wasn't the situation a number of years ago. So we do need to look at how we structure the secondary education in Gloucester, because I know in my part of the city we do not have a good quality comprehensive school on a doorstep. We have to send children out to Newark, out of the 2 church-bound schools, if they're not going to grammar school. If you wanted to send them to grammar school, but you don't want them to go to single-sex school, you've got no choice either. So it's very, very difficult, and I know my partner's got a 10-year-old daughter, and she's now worried about what we do about education in the future for secondary education. So we have a distorted market. So we certainly don't need any further grammar schools. There are 2,000 children per day, 2,205 at the moment, leaving the city of Gloucester to get education. And there are places available in the best schools in Gloucester. And these are schools that are getting good Ofsteds, but they're not letting the children in. They're not letting the children in because they aren't passing the exams to get in. And that is a problem. Richard Ford goes on about he wants grammar schools in every corner and every part of the UK. The problem with that is you've also got secondary schools everywhere in the UK. And I went to a secondary school, and I know the education was not as good as it should have been for me and the kids that went to that school. It was long living school years ago, and I think, you know, we have a problem, and I think, I know Keith from old when he was a county councillor, and he knows my views that we should have a comprehensive education system in Gloucester. It was interesting to note that the Dem policy doesn't mention what we might do in Gloucester is to ensure fair admissions for all schools. And I think that's again the case about the academies, which I'm not entirely happy with, in that the academies will be, you know, the run to be academies to protect your status happened with the grammar schools very quickly in Gloucester, because that was a way of making sure that you didn't get interfered with in any way in your criteria of letting children in from the local education authority. So I think we've got a problem, and that's the reason why children are having to travel when they should be able to walk to their local school, and we need to sort it out. And the next member of Parliament, Gloucester, has got to be braver than the last ones we've had, because they've all been chicken about upsetting people. And when I tried to change things as a county councillor, I had a lot of grief from people, and most of those people were parents who had children who were from outside Gloucester, who wanted to protect the system that was there at the moment. And I've seen schools where, you know, we've had a Gloucester Academy, we've created that, put a lot of public money into it, but it's not delivering. It's got an awful Ofsted. The reason for that is, I don't know why, but we've just got an imbalanced structure in Gloucester, and it's got to be resolved. You know, if you're going to have selection, then you've got to have the right number of forms of entry in the area to cope with that selection. What we have here in Gloucester is too much of availability, and that's why you see schools like Tommy, which is 29% of the children from Gloucester. That's shameful.
Thank you very much. It's difficult for Christine Rowan to comment on any local issues, but I am going to ask her about the union's policy and a good local school for every child, and how she would respond to that generally.
Thanks, President. Well, the President, my past President here has summed it up. The union's policy is clearly that we want a good local school for every child, and by that we mean a school to which they can walk. And the issue about having different types of schools is that they have different types of entrance arrangements, don't they? They don't all allow all children who turn up at their door to come in. And what's really interesting is that, again, the international evidence, OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe, the kind of rich countries club, Andreas Schleicher is their person who heads up education. He was a great favourite of Michael Gove for a while, and it did seem, I think, when this coalition government came into office, that they had put the idea of further grammar schools beyond peradventure, although now there is, of course, talk of more grammar schools. Andreas Schleicher's analysis of school systems is that actually the most successful school systems are schools which are comprehensive. Doesn't mean that they're all identical, but they're comprehensive in terms of their intake, and they deal with those people who come through the door. And the thing about having a selective system, and I've talked about this a lot with colleagues from other countries, is that if you have selection, you automatically have rejection. I mean, that's the downside, isn't it? That if you have a different system. Now, we would say that what you really need is a good local school for every child, so that every child's needs can be met within that institution. And on the question of 2,000 kids moving, you know, in and out of Gloucester, I mean, I think the question is quite right, that just on a green basis, having people bust around simply doesn't make any sense. But, you know, you clearly know the details of the local area much better than I.
Thanks, Chris. No, I'm going to stop here because I've got lots of questions and lots of people want to ask questions, and it's not just teachers either, actually. I'm going to ask for a one-word answer on this next question. And it's Gary Wheeler's. I'm staying on the grammar school issue purely because I'm a grammar school victim. Sorry, a grammar school pupil myself. I absolutely detested the grammar school system, and I was in it for 7 years. And there are only very few left in Wales, and you know, I've come from over the border, not very far. And you know, obviously, don't agree with it. But having said that, I would like to know what the parties do, all the parties, how they do with it. I'm going to ask for a one-word answer: yes or no. There's no grey shades of grey, it's black or white. And I'm going to start with Richard Graham, and I'm going to ask Gary this question for him. Do you support educational apartheid systems known as the grammar school system? Yes or no? the same page, is it yes or no?
I mean, how much?
No, can I just say it's yes or no?
Yeah, somebody who was to one would answer it yes, but
Thank you.
that is
Jeremy Hunter?
a very disappointing question.
Jeremy
to be
Hunter?
honest.
Yes or no?
I'm in favour of fully comprehensive education. I do not support.
So it's yes.
No. I do not support grammar schools as
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Well, it's no then.
Paul?
I'm just trying to explain myself.
No, I know, I just need to know yes or no.
Using the word using the word apartheid is totally shameful. It really is shameful.
The point is, I'm in
Yes or
favour
no?
of comprehensive
I
education.
support grammar schools. I don't support apartheid. It's shameful to put it that way.
Sophie?
No.
Thank you for that. And John? We do understand the yes or no. Okay, can we go on to, I'd like to go to the school governor. And this is quite a mixed bunch of questions. I think it's really interesting. Neil Hampson, school governor in Gloucester, at several schools for the past 22 years. So I think you've seen quite a few things there.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting, really. What you think about that, I've been a governor, past chair governors at the school here. I've been a governor at Davies, chair governors at Linden Primary, and I'm sort of helping out St James at the moment, which is a failing school. But I'll just go to the question. What I would say is that I really like the mix of schools that we have in the city. But that's my point of view.
Can you give your question slowly, because it's quite a long question.
Okay.
We need to be
So excluding the selective schools in Gloucester, last year our education system failed 49% of 16-year-olds. Only 51% achieved grade A to C in English and maths. It's both scandalous and shocking that after 12 years in education, the life chances of so many have been disadvantaged. As it's already been alluded, the high numbers of primary school children suggest that Gloucester is going to need a new school, a new secondary school. Is it not time that we embrace a new vision for Gloucester and the young people in our community and create a vocational school where youngsters of all abilities have a genuine opportunity to succeed? Do any of the panel members share this vision and high aspirations for those young people that up to now have been written off?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and it's very multifaceted. I'm going to go to Sophie Gardner first to answer, please.
Thank you, Neil. I agree with you that those figures are scandalous. In principle, I support that concept of exploring something along the lines of the vocational school as you talk about. We need to make sure that vocational qualifications are given a value that they don't currently have. As many people know, an awful lot of the qualifications that count towards school league tables have been taken out by Michael Grove and Nicky Morgan, leaving only the most sort of academic qualifications in the mix, or subjects, should I say. We want to have better technical and vocational education for children, and if that is delivered in a new concept, in a new sort of school, I'm very open to talking about it. I would also just say that it is, we can, I think, do better, even given the current system that we have in Gloucester. Notwithstanding, I also go back to my comments that I think that our education systems in this city should be prioritised and for the children who live in this city and not others. But I think Gloucester Academy has been very poorly supported by the government. I think it is a scandal what has happened with Prospects Academy Trust, and it's even more of a scandal how much money has been pouring into the pockets of people who are not from around here and who are businessmen who are profiting out of a school that is in difficulty. And I think that we need a new future and better support for schools like that. I'm incensed, as you can probably tell. Because I don't blame the school, the staff, or the teachers, and certainly not the head teacher, who's excellent. It's the situation in which they found themselves under the forced academisation programme.
Thank you, Sophie. Richard Ford.
Thank you. What's a great shame in this country is that people who earn a living with their hands are looked down upon sometimes by people who earn a living with their brain, and I think that's shameful as well. As the last question I thought was shameful. The fact is, let's look at the strongest, most vibrant economy in Europe, which is Germany. You know, people are being trained, kids are being trained for the world of work. In Germany, you have grammar schools which work very, very successfully for the academically inclined, and you have technical schools for those who are much more practically inclined. And that's what we should be doing in this country. Not the old system that Jeremy Hilton alluded to, when you went to a secondary modern and you were on the scrap heap to learn and you were looked down upon and in the street and all the rest of it. That's awful, that's class-ridden, that belongs to the 1950s and earlier. What we want is a modern society, a modern education system, whereby academic kids can go to a grammar school and kids who are more practically inclined can go to a technical school. And I don't really see anything wrong with that. At the end of the day, in many ways, it's the kids who are going to the technical school who are going to create the things, the objects that are going to be sold to create the economic, the money and the wealth in the society. So why should those kids be looked down upon? Bit of class snobbery, old-fashioned class snobbery in the UK. Germany doesn't have that. Germany's the most successful economy in Europe, and I think we should take some lessons from them.
Thank you, Richard. Richard Graham.
Well, Neil, first of all, very good to hear from you. You've got a lot of experience in the education sector. We had very good meetings at the moment when Beaufort was looking at converting to an academy. I think that's been a successful process. This is a good example of a school that's been on the up for the last couple of years, and it's a good example of what can be achieved in Gloucester. I do take quite a lot of exception, Sophy, to some of your comments about Gloucester Academy. As somebody recently arrived in the city, you need to understand the background and the history. In 2009 to 10, Bishop's College was the second worst performing school in the country for GCSE results. Those results now from Gloucester Academy are over 3 times better than they were. It's a journey and they've got a long way to go, but the transformation of the opportunities for those children has been enormous, and you can see it most clearly in the figures that show on the one hand youth unemployment, which has come down 60% over the last 5 years, and apprenticeships, which have more than doubled. We've had 5,900 new apprentices since 2010. So vocational opportunities and vocational education in this city are massively on the up. It's transforming lives, and we should be proud of what's been achieved and recognise what more does need to be achieved. Now, Neil's specific question was really around that point. Should we go for a UTC, a technical college? And I've had very interesting meetings with Ken Baker on this over the last 5 years, several times. But there is one practical point we have to think of before jumping into this too fast. If you go for a UTC, and the funding is available, they're quite well funded, it's a case of finding the land, but there is land available, and it probably would be around the Kingsway, Huntsgrove area. But unless you have enough pupils to be able to go in there almost immediately, you do of course risk diluting existing schools. And the finances of the school are quite heavily leveraged, slightly like airline passenger numbers, on the bums on seats in those schools. So I think the time is going to come, and it won't be very far off. And I think there's a good debate to be had about whether this is another interesting offering in the mix of the selection that we've got in Gloucester. I think there would be demand for it. I think the engineers would welcome it, for example. And the numbers of people who will be living in Huntsgrove, as well as those already in Kingsway, would probably support it without having to dilute, for example, Seven Vale too much. But it is